So what is the big secret? You know, the one that the world's religions claim that they and they only have the answer to? Who we are, where we're from, and how we got here? Well, there's a guy named Terrance Mckenna, and he may have found it.
I think it's just going to get weirder and weirder and weirder, and finally it's going to be so weird that people are going to have to talk about how weird it is.
Network containers, that's how supposedly the aliens look at us.
It would be a shift in the knowledge of humanity, a new knowledge.
What the hell is going on?
The Fractal Soliton of Improbability. That's it. That may be the secret that everyone has been searching for thousands of years. Before I get started here, how tied are you to our culturally acceptable views on reality? Agnostic, atheist, or religious? So if you're agnostic, that means you don't really know if there's a God. If you're an atheist, you don't believe that there's a God. And if you're religious, you believe that there is a God. And that's about it. Well, what's the word for someone who believes that this universe was not created by the all-omniscient God, but one that was a little bit lower, that made some mistakes, tried to insert himself in it, which caused a parallel Earth to split off that is now trying to contact us to save us from our impending doom? No word to describe that one, is there? Not anything in our vocabulary. Well, I guess I can think of one word. Crazy. 'Cause that sounds crazy. But it only sounds crazy because we aren't familiar with that. We haven't heard it before. Take any of our major world religions, the stories that are behind them are pretty wild. And this story, for some reason, there's something about this or aspects of this story, for me, that kind of fit. So I just want you to sit back, relax, open up your mind, and hold on. So this is a theory that once in the lifetime of a universe, there is an event that happens. This event is when a wavelength with one wave, that's why it's called a soliton, is traveling in higher dimensions, and it collides with a planet in the universe. Now, when it collides with a planet, the cool part is its time streams are split, completely divided, and two copies of that entire planet come into existence without either one having any knowledge that it happened or that the other one exists. So an exact twin of that planet exists in a different time stream. So the idea is that this is just something that can happen in the life of a universe. And the kicker is, that happened to Earth. That's the theory. That is what happened to us that we've always been trying to understand. And now it's time to get weird. Now, the guy who came up with this theory, Terrance Mckenna, when he talks about it, he says when the idea came to him, it was so bizarre and weird that the only way he could continue to entertain the thought is if he pretended it was the plot for a science fiction novel. So that's what I recommend doing. Just imagine it's a Christopher Nolan movie. Actually, he made the movie Interstellar and Inception, and I would love to see him make a movie like this. So here we go. Brace yourselves. So the mythological part of this idea is that this universe was not created by the all highest omniscient God. that this one was created by one that was a little lower. That's what they used to call a demiurge. Now, when I hear the word demiurge, it sounds kind of evil to me. But I looked it up in the Greek, and it actually means craftsman. So I'm going to call it creator being. So this creator being made this universe we're in. But it also wanted to incarnate itself into its own universe. To be a human. To be part of history. And the idea is that when this creator being did incarnate into human history, that is when the Soliton split happened. That's when a complete twin of our planet broke off into another dimension. And at that moment, an exact replica of this Earth was created. Well, you may be wondering, who did this creator being incarnate as? Well, it was Jesus, the Christ. No one can deny that Christ was an extraordinary manifestation of energy. I mean, every single time we refer to what year it is, it's, right now, 2025. Since what? Since Jesus. Louis C.K. has a great bit about this. But it's true. Every single day, we're writing down what year it is. We're typing it on the internet, where we're filling it out on any forms, and we are constantly reminded every single day, 2025 years since this huge event. Maybe we're not counting so much as from the Christ, but as from this Soliton split. This power, or should I say idea, that came with the Christ was so disruptive, the powers that be had to try to contain it in order to keep control. Which is why they decided to take it over and then hijack the idea and change it. And get rid of all the other evidence that says anything contrary, which is what they did. Now it's time for another plot twist. Because of a quantum mechanical half charge, when this split happened, the Christ, or the creator being, only incarnated into one of the two Earths. When the other parallel Earth split off, that Earth had no Christ on it. So it's not so much that there was never any genetic expression of Christ on this parallel Earth, but there was no ideology. There was no ideology of the Christ. There was none of that immense power and ideological power that came and interrupted history on their planet, which you would assume would be a bad thing. But in this parallel Earth that never heard about the Christ, they never had the reaction to it. They never had the Roman government hijack it and make it into their own version. The Roman Catholic Church. And that word Catholic, it means universal. And the word church is from the word ecclesia, which is an old word for government. So really, you could say the Roman Catholic Church actually translate into the Roman universal government. And that reactionary Roman universal government that came forth suppressed Greek science. It closed the academies, and it also suppressed hermetic knowledge. But in this parallel Earth that never had the power of the Christ come in it, the Roman government did not suppress Greek science. It did not close the academies, and it did not suppress Hermetic knowledge. So the empire was stronger and able to repel the barbarian invasions of the 2nd to the 5th centuries. Also, mathematics was not suppressed, so they developed calculus by AD 370. Because of this, engineering flourished, and by 850 they traveled across the Atlantic Ocean. They came to the Americas and discovered the Mayan civilization at its peak in Guatemala and the Yucatan Peninsula. So this open-minded Greco-Roman culture, they instantly recognized the genius of the Mayans in mathematics and astronomy, and they brought this back to Europe, and it was transformed into a combination of Greco-Mayan civilization that continued to advance. They eventually discovered the Orient centuries before we did, and the influence of the Sung dynasty on this worldview created a global civilization, one that had a completely different worldview and idea of what reality is than us. You see, in our world, religion stopped the pursuit of science, math, and true spirituality because of the dominance of this Christianity. Humanity was stalled for 1,000 years. But back in the parallel Earth, by about 1200 AD, they landed on the moon. They created a cybernetic global civilization similar to the one that we have now. But they continued evolving into this psychotronic, shamanic type civilization that is very different from our own. Now, through that psychedelic and psychoanalytic investigating, they looked into higher spaces, and they eventually discovered us. They found out what happened to us. They found this by studying dreams and by making deep journeys into the psychedelic/astral space. They discovered our sleeping unconscious with its story of the legacy of the Christian centuries under the reign of this skewed creator being ideology. It stunted our growth for 1,000 years. So they felt sorry for us, and they decided to save us. Now this part, right here, the thing that I'm going to say next is the entire point of even tackling this subject, or why I decided to do a podcast about it. Wait for it. Wait for it. They are the UFOs. So this parallel Earth is a Greco-Roman starfaring civilization that is reaching across the dimensions to try to save us. How will they save us? Well, they have to let us know they exist, and they have technology to share with us. I guess they'll have to let us know what's going on and give us a truer picture of what reality actually is and how to use it. And there are theories that the technology that we have now was given to us by them. I mean, we've come pretty far in the past 100 years. From the Wright brothers' first flight in 1903 to the space travel of the 60s is pretty crazy. But what's even crazier is think about computers. In the 50s, They would have these huge mainframe computers that would take up a whole room or building. They were enormous. And now, because of the internet and smartphones, we have all of the knowledge in the world in our pockets. Like, just think about that for a second. And we're just getting started. Now, there's another part to this theory that for me, when I heard this, it just really seems to fit a pattern that I've seen. Now, if you've ever watched any documentaries on UFOs, or followed it to any degree, one pattern you will see is that the UFOs, they really do hang around nuclear power plants a lot, and nuclear missile sites across the world in the US. A quick search on YouTube and you'll see all kinds of stories of military personnel giving first-hand accounts of UFOs buzzing around their bases and even disabling nuclear missiles. Also, countless UFO abduction stories where the people are saying they were communicated to by the aliens about nuclear weapons and we need to get rid of them. In my first episode I did, Starman, I talked about how Vrillon from the Ashtar Galactic Command, he interrupted a British television station to give a message of warning that we have to get rid of our nuclear weapons and that we are threatening beings on worlds around us. Well, some people from the science community have put forth a theory that when we detonate nuclear weapons, that not only destroys our world, but that ripples through dimensions. Now, to try and prove my point here, wait till you hear this. You may be familiar with the Oppenheimer movie. It came out the past couple years, and it was about J. Robert Oppenheimer. He was the guy that headed up the entire project. And of course, that project was to develop the first nuclear weapon, the Manhattan Project. Well, I think it was maybe 10 to 20 years after this, he did a television interview. And in that interview, the host asked him how he felt and what did he think when the nuclear bomb first went off.
He knew the world would not be the same. Few people laughed. Few people cried. Most people were silent. I remembered the line from the Hindu scripture, the Bhagavad Gita. Vishnu is trying to persuade the prince that he should do his duty, and to impress him takes on his multi-armed form and says, "Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds." I suppose we all thought that, one way or another.
Did you hear that? Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds, plural. He was quoting the Bhagavad Gita. That's an ancient Hindu story that many think was possibly a nuclear war that happened thousands of years ago. And it's very interesting that he chose to quote that. I mean, a nuclear scientist that helped develop the first nuclear bomb quoted a story that many think may have been a nuclear war that happened thousands of years ago. It's very strange. And now, things are going to get a little stranger when you hear this. There's something called the Tunguska event. Now, this took place in Siberia, Russia, near a Tunguska River. And in 1908, there was an explosion that went off. Somewhere between 3 and 50 megatons. This explosion flattened an estimated 80 million trees over 2,150 square kilometers. This explosion has been generally attributed to some sort of meteor airburst, an atmospheric explosion, maybe 50 to 60 meters wide, they think. They think that an asteroid approached from the southeast, probably at a speed of like 60,000 miles an hour. At least that's the theory. They don't actually know what happened. But they think something exploded in the atmosphere above Earth because there is no impact crater. And this Tunguska event is the largest impact event ever on Earth in recorded history, and they're not sure exactly what did it. Now listen to this. When Terrance was getting this download about this theory, he was told that this parallel Earth had come across the theory and the principles for splitting the atom. Except they were smart and they never did it for hundreds of years. And then through exploring the dreams and astral travel and the different ways that they found us, they saw that we were playing around with splitting the atom. And they had some theories that detonating an atomic weapon or splitting the atom could ripple through dimensions and hurt them. So what they decided to do was detonate a nuclear bomb and see if it rippled through dimensions and did damage in our world. And the way that they were monitoring our world was by paying attention to the dreams of shaman that were in that area. You know, it's funny, I was watching a YouTube documentary on the Tunguska event, and nobody could ever get there to investigate for 20 years. They knew what happened. They saw the bright flash of light, I guess, all over Europe. But it took 20 years for someone to get there and investigate. And in this documentary, they were talking about how the shaman from back then had passed on stories of what happened and how they saw it as that the gods were angry. Can you imagine if that's true? If that Tunguska event was from a bomb in another dimension rippling through into ours? Man, that's insane. But you know, that fits. That would make sense. Why there are UFOs around nuclear power plants, around nuclear test sites, around nuclear missile silos all over the world. I've seen maps of UFO sightings, and they're always around nuclear stuff. They've had stories of UFOs following like nuclear destroyers and aircraft carriers and submarines. To me, that's a part of the theory that just makes sense. Why they have such a vested interest in making sure we don't destroy our planet is because it will affect theirs. And of all of the different alien encounters that I've read and listened to over the years, and you see that pop up over and over and over again. They're talking about we need to take care of our planet. We need to get rid of these nuclear weapons. They are trying to get our attention, to wake us up. And Terrance had another point. He said we shouldn't ask so much as who are the UFOs. That's a tough one to answer. But the question is, what are they doing? What are they doing to society? Think about it. What do they cause us to do? They cause us to distrust science and religion. They disrupt science because the UFOs don't follow the laws of physics. They do things that the general physics doesn't account for. So in order to explain what's going on, they have to change their definition of what's going on. And for some reason, they're very reluctant to. It kind of doesn't make sense. You think that science should be more curious than anyone, but they are extremely uncurious. I've heard people say about Elon Musk, he's extremely uncurious. Every time he's asked about aliens, he's seen nothing. There's nothing to talk about. That's bizarre. Isn't it curiosity that got him this far in the first place? Yet he is not curious at all. I don't believe it. To me, it just doesn't make any sense. So when the pressure is put onto science, they have to dig their heels in. If they're not going to address some of these issues, they have to dig their heels in and pretend like it doesn't exist. Because with a materialistic view of reality, science doesn't have to account for things that are going on that they can't measure. They get off the hook because they use Occam's razor and say it's too complex. The simplest solution has to be the correct one. And through that, society, humanity, does not demand an answer. But the UFOs disrupt that. The more they draw attention to themselves, the more they get our attention to what's going on. They are waking us up. And what happens is when the science community puts pressure on society to ignore them, to say they're just swamp gas, or they're mistaken airplanes, or the person was seeing things, when they do that, they are really telling us to suppress our own judgment and keep our trust of what's going on in these governing bodies. And the UFOs give religion a problem because they haven't accounted for them in their story of what's going on. So as sightings and contact increase, they are going to have to account for them somehow. And the question is, whose job is it to change the story of the religion? I mean, I just know in Christianity, the Pope, I guess I could see him for the Catholics at least, changing his definition of what's going on, adding a few things, taking some away for the Catholics. But what about the Protestants? They don't have any one big leader the way the Catholics do that could just change their definition of what's going on or add or take away from their narrative. See, and that's the thing about religion, especially Christianity. They're looking for this physical Messiah to save them, for the ultimate leader. They're looking outside of themselves. But I think in this new age, people aren't searching out for a physical Messiah, but we're searching out for the ultimate idea. It's not a Messiah that's going to save us and humanity. It's an idea. And what's that idea, you might ask? Well, the idea of just what is really going on in this reality. And who are we? I think we can all agree that we can't all agree on who they are, but I think we can all agree on what they do to society. Well, there you have it. That's the main part of the theory, at least anyways. Now with Terrance, that theory was just the beginning of something that he developed called time wave zero. And that's an entire other podcast, and something at this point I have a hard time exactly grasping enough to really explain it. Now it's probably time to address the elephant in the room. Who is Terrance Mckenna, and how did he come up with this theory? Well, he was an American ethnobotanist and Wikipedia calls mystic. I think of him as a modern-day shaman. He was a big proponent for the responsible use of psychedelics, and if you ever listen to him talk, an extremely deep guy. And yes, he did get this theory when he was on mushrooms. But personally, I don't see that any different than, once again, I always go back to any of our big religions. All of them started with stories of humans interacting with interdimensional beings while meditating or high or both. The only difference is he existed in our time. He passed away in 2000, but you can listen to probably hundreds of hours of his lectures and talking straight from the source. And the other guys from the big religions, they had their downloads happen thousands of years ago, and we rely on books written by authority-type structures to tell us what's going on. Now, we've gone through the theory, we've broken it down, and now the question is that the answer to the big secret? Who we are, where we're from, and what our purpose is? And is part of the answer that Christianity has stunted the growth of the earth for 1,000 years and led us down a path towards nuclear weapons and ultimate destruction? And that a parallel earth in a different dimension and time stream is trying to save us? That they are the lights in the skies. They are the dreams and the encounters we've been having, and that they are trying to wake humanity up. Now, I want you to imagine for a second that you're hearing this for the first time, not from some random guy doing a podcast, but you're hearing this from government officials, people who are supposed to know the truth. Now picture being in a meeting with these government officials, where they've sat you down and they're going to tell you the reality of what's going on, and they present to you this theory. How do you think you would react? How do you think you would feel hearing this for the first time? Now, there's a story that has circulated around the UFO community for years. And this story has to do with President Jimmy Carter. You see, Jimmy Carter is different because he saw a UFO in the 60s while he was in politics, I believe, and he reported it to NASA. And he openly talked about it. So when he was running for his presidency, he told people that he was going to look into it and find out what's going on with the UFOs. Well, he got elected, and he asked to be read into the program. And one day in June of 1977, he had a meeting. Now, this source that was in the meeting with him, he was on the other side of the room, so he couldn't hear what was said, but he could see his reaction to it. And when they told him, he was visibly disturbed. He put his head into his hands. He appeared to be weeping. And it was said for weeks after that he was physically distressed. And I should also note that Jimmy Carter was a self-described born-again Christian. And the question goes with this story, that what could he have heard that was so upsetting? What was so shocking and disturbing to him that he would bury his head in between his hands? That his physical body language would represent the shock of the information. What did he hear? What did they tell him? Well, maybe they told him about the fractal soliton of improbability.